Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV, and welcome to this, Apollo Detectives 10. We're in the double figures now, guys. Yeah. Take that, Steve Mumbling. Well, how are we going to trigger Steve Mumbling today? I think we're going to bring back on Rasa Viharii. Yes, he's got a brilliant presentation, which I think has the perfect title, Debunking the Debunkers. Yes, I'm sure some people are going to say it's a steaming pile, it's a absolute rubbish, but maybe it'd be easier for them to get to grips with the actual arguments this time or not. I don't know. I expect some people have already watched this on Neil Geddes-Ward's channel. If you haven't, then you can always go over there. But if you're already watching this video, why not stick around and watch it here? Hope you enjoy it.
And welcome everybody. My name is Ben Emlyn Jones and this is the Apollo Detectives. We're back again. This is our 10th program. Now that's quite a milestone. I think now we're in double figures. I think people have to take us seriously. If you haven't already, which I hope you have. I'm joined today, but it's a smaller team than normal, but we'll make up for it, I'm sure, in terms of quality that we lack in quantity. We have, of course, my producer and director, Neil Geddes-Ward. Greetings, Neil.
Hello, Ben. Hi, Rasa. Good to be back with you both. Yeah, as a smaller team, but still just as strong. Marcus sends his best regards. He's actually a little bit busy at the minute, so he will join us hopefully in the next presentation. Don't know when that'll be, but Marcus sends his best wishes to everybody. I think he's busy getting Nexus magazine ready, so we'll mention Nexus magazine because I know that he always mentions it anyway, so I'm sure he'd enjoy the mention of it on his behalf. So it's good to be back, and I believe that we've got Rasa's presentation this evening, so we can go straight over to Rasa if you like.
We have Rasa Viharii all the way from not so sunny China. It's actually freezing cold China, and he's dressed appropriately, as you can see. It is the one and only Rasa Viharii. Hi, Rasa.
Hi guys, I've got a really great presentation for you today. I've got a lot of stuff nobody's ever seen before, and a whole nother aspect of the moon landings nobody's ever discussed before. So I'm really excited today about this.
Excellent. It is Steve Mumbling triggering time, guys. Let's go for it.
Oh, well, hang on. Before we go for the presentation, I know that RAS has been looking into the Artemis project. And what is it that they brought forward a thing? Because normally they're quite behind with it. They've actually brought one of their missions forward now to 2023.
Yeah, this is. I'm going to talk about that later, but they're feeling very confident about Artemis 2, which is the manned mission to just orbit the moon. And so I've been studying a lot how they're going to try to pull that off, and I think they might actually do it. You know, whether they can actually put a man on the surface is another question.
It's still going to be quite something if they can, by next year, they can actually get another manned mission to the moon. That'll be actually incredible. It's just an orbital.
Yeah.
I think they can get a manned mission to the moon. It's whether they can get them back is the problem. You know,
well,
you can fire 100 people through the radiation belts. And they might live for maybe a day or two and not feel very well enough to even land on the moon by that point, you know.
Well, we know a lot more things. We know more about the radiation belts of the now than we did in 1960 when the whole thing started. This is the whole point is that the Apollo mission was essentially planned without any real knowledge of what the real risk was, not just only from the Van Allen belts, but what happened beyond the Van Allen belts in terms of solar radiation, cosmic radiation, etc. So we know a lot more about that now, so we can assess the risk. So Because a lot of skeptics said, well, they were very lucky. Oh, easy to say that afterwards when everything's gone fine. Not so easy to say it beforehand when you're going to send human beings into an environment which you don't know about on live TV, where they could receive a lethal dose of radiation. So obviously, we'll see how it goes. We'll see what happens next year, though. But carry on, Rasa, with your news and presentation, because it's very interesting.
Yeah. So I want to just try to start the screen sharing now.
Okay, go for that.
Yeah. You are.
All right. So I've got this presentation today I call Debunking the Debunkers.
Excellent.
And the first debunker I'm going to start debunking is this guy, Curious Droid. And this guy is absolutely just a clown, you know, what he's saying on his show. So
I'm familiar with his channel. I've watched his channel, and this particular video, he's a lot of people remark that he looks like me. I suppose he does a bit, although this is why I wear a hat with him on TV, so I don't look too much like him.
So okay, I want to. So he's standing behind this picture of the course that they took in order to fly around the Van Allen belts, right? So I'm going to show what is the source, what is the reference of this picture he's standing in front of, okay?
Okay.
So it comes from this document, which is Apollo 11 Translunar Trajectory, a document written by Robert A. Browning.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, who is Robert A. Browning? He's a nobody. He's a carpenter who does he likes to play with rockets in his free time. Okay. So he has nothing to do with NASA at all. You know. So if you read his document, if you go to this, you just search that name and you look at his document, it's full of, really, it's just based on bad science, and I'm about to explain that. You know, he just took an old NASA picture of these belts, and then he drew this blue line on it based on, you know, his calculations, and he put all this math in there and tried to calculate the course which they supposedly took. So I'm going to debunk this first of all. So now you see I laid a protractor on top of the picture, right?
Yeah.
So you can count, that's 10, 20, 30 degrees. He's claiming that there's a 30-degree course they took, right, to get around the belt. Now, where did he get this 30-degree course from? I'm going to show you. So this comes from the NASA webpage. I don't know if you can see this, but there's the link here in the top. And there's two different pages. One page has the translunar injection, and one has the returning to Earth. Okay, or entry, splashdown, recovery. So this would be returning to Earth. And here we have all of the Apollo 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, all of it is there because they have to mark all of the flights. So let me zoom in here. He has the his 30 degree is coming from here. Can you see where it says 30 degrees here?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so that's coming from here. It's inclination degree. You know, so we can see Apollo 8 was 30, Apollo 10, 31, Apollo 11, 31. So there's this nice 30, 30, 30 number going on here. But this is actually not the number he's supposed to be looking at. The number he's supposed to be looking at here is the geodectic latitude. Okay, so I highlighted that with a red line. So this is the actual latitude above the equator,
right,
where the ship was leaving from. And so you can see here, this is actually a 21 degree above the latitude. There's the geocentric latitude and the geodetic latitude, and they're both about equal. And if you look down here to the coming back, the re-entry, you also have the geodetic latitude. So here they're coming from a negative 30 degree. Oh, sorry, this is Apollo 7 and then Apollo 8. So you can see, okay, here's the return latitude. Okay, so let's look at these numbers, because these are the real numbers, the latitude of when they were taking off from. You know, so we've got the here's the Apollo 11, a 9 degree latitude, Apollo 12, 6 degree, Apollo 13, negative 3 degree, Apollo 14, negative 19 degree. So it goes like that. You know, here's Apollo 7 was a 4.7 degree latitude. And then you coming down here to the return entry. Apollo 7 is only a 0.17 latitude. So that means they're just basically coming straight back in at the equator level. So what do you mean about flying around the Van Allen belts? This is going straight through it.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is NASA didn't want to make so this whole theory about flying around the belt, NASA didn't publish that. That didn't come from NASA. It came from this Robert guy. And so NASA didn't want to make that statement, we flew around the belt, because that would make them look like idiots, because their own documents prove that they didn't fly around the belt. So they let this other guy write this paper, and they gave him an award for writing this paper. Oh, thanks for telling us that we flew around the belt. Now, so then we're going to let you be the one who say that, because we're not going to say that ourselves, and we're going to give you an award for saying that. So this is the actual source material for that whole theory about we flew around the belt. Is just this Robert A. Browning guy's paper. And nowhere in NASA's documents does it actually say that. It actually says they flew right through the belts.
So this Browning guy, basically, he's using the wrong set of figures to create that illustration. And then NASA give him an award. So they give him an award to say thank you very much. But in a sense, they get the best of both worlds, because if he messes up, and of course he has, and it's exposed, they don't have to take the rap for it. They'll just say, well, he's an independent fellow traveler. And
they take their reward back.
Yeah, because the skeptics have gone on and on about this. I mean, not just Shillito. A lot of them have gone on about this. I've had to deal with people who mentioned this and said, look, they flew around the Van Allen belts without explaining exactly, well, how did they know how big the belts were? How high were the belts? How thick were they? What was their intensity? And of course, that varies through the solar cycle. It was. I see now, if they're going straight through the belts, then again, into an environment they weren't 100% sure what would happen, with a very large risk factor. It's I think what it looks to me that they just, after the missions were complete, these supposed missions, they just said, well, let's just put this in as a kind of backfilling so that it makes us look more credible.
All right, so I think we can put that to bed. You know, this whole flew around the belts theory is just ridiculous. You know, you can read through his papers and you can see he's just basing it on the wrong evidence here, wrong data points.
As a follow-up to that, people can go on to YouTube, to Jarrah's YouTube channel, and check out Radiation Reloaded, and he's got a very long production there where he's in discussion with the author of this chart, Robert Browning, and they've had a bit of a to and fro over the years. So it's a lot of facts and figures in that for anyone that knows a lot about radiation. So it's worth looking at if anyone wants to follow that up. I'll try and put a link for it in the below section on our video.
All right. So now here's a document which I just found from Apollo. And this is talking about the mission doses, how much radiation did they get on certain flights, okay? So they're saying, oh, okay, on Mercury, the radiation dose was pretty low, Gemini a little bit higher. And then they put the space shuttle and Apollo here together. Oh, yeah, the radiation on the shuttle missions and the radiation on Apollo was equal. And then they put it the few shuttle missions where they went up to the Hubble level. Okay, there's more radiation when they went up to the Hubble level. So they're actually saying that the Apollo missions got less radiation than the Hubble missions, and even less radiation. This is just a flat out lie here. How dare they say?
Yeah, the Apollo shuttle thing makes no sense at all, because the Apollo missions went hundreds of times higher than the Apollo missions, than the shuttle missions. But Apollo, of course, went all the way much higher. I think the Skylab Mir ISS may refer to the length of the missions, which of course is much more.
Right. So that's the official. That's the official story NASA is using now. You know, we want to go to Mars, and the radiation is up there, and the reason the radiation is so high is because the length of the mission.
Yeah, I mean, what you have here, it looks like there's an exponential. The graph on the left axis looks kind of like an exponential cycle. It goes from 1 to 10, and it goes to 100 to 1,000. Right. But that still does not explain why Apollo and shuttle are the same. It just doesn't make sense.
Right, and how can they say Apollo was more than the Hubble mission? Because both the Apollo mission and the Hubble mission was also just a few days. So,
well, Hubble's
So that's their whole excuse, is that the Apollo missions was only a few days, so they didn't get much radiation. That's the official story they're telling everybody now. And you know,
well, shuttle missions tend to be quite short as well. I mean, they go up for about a week or so. I mean, it's about the same. Generally, I'd say, from what I've seen, it's about the same duration. The only long distance missions long time missions would be the permanent space station, Skylab Mir ISS. No doubt the Salyut series were the same. But that's when they spend like months up there. But they're still quite a low. They're still in a low Earth orbit, so they are protected from most of the radiation of space. So
this document is just a flat out lie. You know, to say that Apollo missions was less than the Hubble mission.
I mean, ideally, it should be up there with the Mars mission, because even during Apollo 16, I think it was, it's the John Young mission anyway. I think Ralph Rene pointed out in his book that when they flew out there on the second day on the way to the moon, that they encountered a great big solar flare or something, which would have put them well up on their dose, I'd imagine. But, you know, they all came back fine, apparently. So, you know, they should be a peak on that graph, shown at least one Apollo mission with that solar flare hitting them, that it should be peaking up into the Mars region, really.
Yeah, also the Hubble is actually it was the first space telescope, wasn't it?
Yes.
So it didn't have it was unmanned. There was no crew on board.
They did a repair on it about 2 years later, though.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was actually three or four missions where they flew up to repair it.
Yeah.
But they were only there for a few days, you know.
Yeah. They basically put a new lens on it or something.
That's astronomy, because, like you say, Apollo and shuttle are down like it's like it's on the, I don't know what these figures are exactly, but it's like 1 to 5, and then you go up to a Hubble and it's like 850 to 80. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I don't get that at all.
So where do they get these from? It comes from the dosimeter readings, right?
Oh yeah, they had these at my hospital. The X-ray staff had to wear these.
Yeah. So all these debunkers, they always quote this Apollo document, which states the dosimeter readings that the Apollo astronauts experienced, right? So here's the thing. Okay, a dosimeter is just this little badge-like thing you wear on your shirt, right? Now, the dosimeter measures the dose uptake of ionizing radiation, right? So, but that's not the real problem. We're actually more worried about the non-ionizing radiation. that's the galactic cosmic radiation and things like that, you know.
Yeah.
So to wear a dosimeter is actually not even measuring the right things.
Mm. Mm.
Well, it's like
That-
there's alpha, beta, and gamma. Yeah, gamma radiation. That you
Right,
can't
that's
like.
ionized.
Yeah, there's like X-rays, of course, which are very, very harmful in high when it comes to high dosages.
Right,
As
but
you've seen, people have.
this is also just ionizing radiation. The dosimeter, you can go to this Wikipedia page and it will tell you a dosimeter is good for measuring this kind of radiation and not so good at measuring that kind. But all of that is ionizing radiation. So the whole point is, how are they going to monitor the non-ionizing radiation? And they're not. That's part of the whole Artemis mission now, is they're going to actually start measuring the non-ionizing radiation now. They had no idea how to even, how to measure that back then during the Apollo mission.
But they did take a skull
here it
on board
is.
the shuttle. They did take a skull on board the shuttle to measure how far the radiation penetrated into a human skull. So they should have a better idea, at least. I mean, obviously that was a shuttle levels of maybe 200, 300 miles high. I don't know which mission it was, but they did put a skull in a cupboard on the board the space shuttle for a couple of missions at least.
All right. So they
Someone
probably
didn't
gave
make
it
on
a
the Apollo.
So this
Right.
is the non-ionizing radiation. So if you just go to Wikipedia and you search a cosmic ray,
Mm-hmm.
so this is the galactic cosmic radiation. And how do you detect it? What are the detection methods? There's two. There's the directed detection and the indirect detection. And if you look up here, it's basically, they have layers of plastic, and you can see the cosmic ray shooting through the plastic. And it's just, so there's this is very old, it dates back to the 1930s. It was when they discovered this method of detecting cosmic rays.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't bring that on the Apollo missions.
Yeah.
There was all these experiments in the 1950s where they sent up weather balloons and they had this cosmic ray detectors, and they said, okay, the higher you go, the worse it gets.
Yeah, a small amount of cosmic radiation does actually reach the surface and it can be detected. I remember seeing a thing about that. Although it would have again, they know the difference between, for example, different levels of the atmosphere, how much cosmic radiation gets depending on your altitude. And I know that you don't have to go very high up to be in a situation where you are actually getting a much higher dose. This is why air stewardesses who get pregnant are grounded until the baby's born.
Yeah. What is this really high flying airplane?
It's one of the spy planes, is it?
Well, there's several Concorde, and there's Concorde.
Concorde.
Right. That's the passenger jet. That's right. Yeah.
In one of the NASA videos, she's saying that the Concorde, the stewardess, has to wear a dosimeter, and because they're qualified as a high radiation risk job.
It's 60. It cruises 60,000 feet. Very high up. Yeah. And at that level, most of the atmosphere is below you. Most of the Earth's atmosphere is beneath you at that point. And
so now they're the new kind of materials that they're using for the Artemis mission. Now they're proposing to use this for the Concorde as well, to protect Concorde passengers from radiation.
Well, right. Concorde doesn't fly anymore, but there are airliners. Yeah, there are
other high flying.
Yeah, other planes fly very high too, and even like a normal airliner goes to like 40,000 feet, and even there was a radiation risk to. For example, if you're pregnant, if you're a woman who's pregnant, don't fly that high because there is radiation could harm your baby. That's what I heard, and that's at 40,000 feet. So, yeah, we are blanketed from a lot of this stuff here at the ground level. And really sending a manned mission, but not just above the atmosphere, but above the ionosphere, right out into deep space, cislunar space they call it now.
Mm-hmm.
It was an extraordinary thing to do without, with just seen as that, they were literally less than a decade since this kind of stuff had really been studied in earnest.
Mm.
These kinds of phenomena have been studied. I mean, they may have been lucky, they may have not, but I mean, goodness me, I mean, what if they got it wrong?
Yeah.
This is the authoritative document on deep space radiation, written in 2012.
Okay.
This is where they talk about there's three kinds of radiation. There's the GCR, galactic cosmic radiation, and then in the solar cosmic, there's two categories: SCR, solar cosmic radiation, SPE, solar particle events. Yeah. So these are the three things they're worried about. When you wear a dosimeter, you're just measuring this SCR, right?
Right.
But even here it says the SCR is generally considered not to be dangerous because it's fairly easy to block that out, But when you talk about the SPC, the solar particle events, that's very dangerous, And so now if you look at the Artemis mission, what they're doing now is they're gonna be constant when the astronauts go up, they're going to be constantly measuring the sun, and if they notice a solar particle event, they're going to tell the astronauts, get into the shelter. So they built this shelter in the middle of the ship, right? Get into the shelter because the solar particle events are coming, And then, but that doesn't even include the galactic cosmic radiation. That's what we were just talking about in the previous screen. This is the galactic cosmic radiation, and it just passes through anything,
Yeah.
They'll admit there's no way to block it out, So they're looking at all these different ways to mitigate this galactic cosmic radiation, They're looking at medical methods, because it's going to damage your DNA. There's no way to stop it.
It's at my hospital there were radiotherapy chambers, and where cancer patients would be given very high doses of X-rays from a machine called a LINAC. Now it's basically the doors were like about 9 to 10 inches thick, and there was a lot of lead in it, so they were really, really heavy to open and shut. The walls and the floors and the ceiling, again, they had a layer of lead, and that was enough that did actually prevent the radiation from the LINAC from leaving the room. However, it's extremely heavy. I mean, you're talking about tons. The actual lead shielding in this chambers was enormous. It's far too heavy to be a payload on the rocket. You couldn't do that. So what exactly is this shelter made of? I'm curious to know what it's actually made of.
Well, I'm gonna come to that. I've got a lot of points here.
Sure.
So this is a Wikipedia page called "The Health Threat from Cosmic Rays," and this is one of the most unbiased Wikipedia pages. Because they're just going on and on about how this stuff will just penetrate your DNA and it causes mutations. Yeah. The only thing they mention is, okay, somehow Apollo didn't need to worry about that. Yeah. But, they're going on and on about how dangerous it is, the galactic cosmic rays, So it's just an interesting article I think people should read.
All right.
And here's a TEDx interview, how we can better protect astronauts from space radiation. And so this is also a good one to watch, because she's just talking about how it just destroys your DNA and we can't stop it. And, we're looking at different medical means and different other means to try to, keep the astronauts alive. So the whole thing is just like, they didn't have to worry about this during the Apollo mission. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like a lot of things. Like Marcus was talking about Phil Coots and what he said about the engineering of the rocket itself. It sounds very similar to that. I have to look. I mean, I've not seen this yet, but it looks interesting.
Yeah, this
Funnily
is a
enough,
great interview. This
the
is one
term
of the most. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the term showstopper, that has
Yeah.
been used before. It was actually, it was either Marcus or it was Mary Bennett, who was interviewed by John Ronson in a program in the 1990s, and they used the term showstopper to talk about cosmic radiation,
Yeah.
saying that basically it's the biggest showstopper in the universe when it comes to manned spaceflight.
Yeah, so this is a great TEDx interview, and it's probably one of the most unbiased ones. You know, he doesn't mention anything about how Apollo somehow managed to survive it. He goes on and on about, and then he gives a solution. Maybe the best solution, the best idea is to use a magnetic shielding. You know, so he mentions that on TEDx.
Nice.
So this is another really interesting NASA engineer, and the name is Radiation Shielding for Deep Space Mission. And this is where he's talking about the magnetic shielding. And I paused it on this one quote. You know, this is the most honest quote. He says, "But then if you were to leave low Earth orbit, we don't have the technology for that."
We used to, but we don't anymore.
And it's from NASA.
Yeah. So this is like, you know, he's talking about how he's one of the people who's designing this magnetic shielding. Okay. So this is a really great interview to watch here. So I'm going into this is a document which is hard to find. You know, this is the actual magnetic shielding. Okay. And there it's called the magnetospheric. So this is a kind of a plasma shielding. They're calling it a magnetospheric dipolar torus, MDP. You know, you got this big torus and it creates these magnetic shields around your ship. That's going to protect you.
Almost like a mini Van Allen belt around the ship itself.
Exactly.
Exactly how it functions, yeah.
So this is a 2008 document, which comes from this company which designed this. And the problem is, well, coming back to here, if this is the more recent document from 2012, and he's designed a different shaped kind of, but it's the same principle, creating a magnetic force field around your ship, you know. And but the question is, where is the energy? In order to create a magnetic shield, where does the energy come from? So I found this 2002 article. It's called "A Plasma Source for Generation and Inflation of Large-Scale Magnetospheres." And so they've got this kind of a plasma generator that they've been experimenting with since 2002. And we're going to come into that later, but this can be considered a what we call a free energy or a zero-point energy device. So they're not going to, it's hard to find, you won't find information about. I just found this article where they mention it. Okay, we've got this new kind of plasma source for generating the fields, but they don't, that's all they say about it. This is a top secret thing, and they're not going to make a big deal. And there's two reasons for it. One is that it is a free energy device, and two, by saying that we need to create these plasma fields around the spaceship is basically saying that Apollo never went.
That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. Because not, in a sense, they're in a situation where they have to confess to one conspiracy or the other, and they've decided to confess to the free energy one. I mean, this is it's kind of a different subject in a way, but it is connected in the way you've demonstrated. And the fact they just say we've got a plasma source without saying what that is, every curious person should say, well, what is that source? How do you generate? You need some generation mechanism for creating energy. You need a lot of electrical power to produce this magnetic shield. What other applications can it be attached to? Can we use it for domestic, and industrial energy generation? I know that's your speciality, Raza. I know because I interviewed you about this subject on Hapanwa Radio. But that's it, absolutely astounding. They really have been pushed into a corner, and they say, well, which one do we confess to? The moon landings or the free energy? They may have tossed a coin. Heads, it's free energy. All right. There you go.
I'm going to go into a lot of detail about that. I've got a lot of other stuff about this. So it's related to the, you've heard about these recent articles about China's artificial sun.
Oh, yeah.
It's also related to that. The way that they're creating these plasma sources, they're using superconducting wire in order to create these magnetic fields to contain the plasma. So this is very much related to this artificial sun technology. So I'm going to go into that later. Oops, the next one is I'm sorry, that shouldn't be there. Okay, the next one is another article I just got from the NASA webpage. And this is talking about what is the improvements that Orion has over the Apollo command module. So they're comparing the Orion command module to the Apollo command module. And it says here, Orion has had a massive upgrade. And it has not only a new alloy, but this new friction stir welded in order to keep the aluminum welded together. But the important thing is, like, whoa, it says here we have a new alloy. Okay, they're not mentioning what that alloy is, but that's the key thing. How are you going to block out this cosmic galactic radiation? They've got a new alloy, which the Apollo didn't have.
Well, they used aluminium, which is for its weight because it's very light. But if it's
right,
it'd be nice to know exactly what. Yeah.
Aluminium would make it just worse, because when the galactic, like putting lead, when the galactic rays hit the aluminium, it creates the secondary particles on the inside of the craft.
Yeah, Megan Hewell, actually, the skeptic, actually mentioned that. I did a review of her talk. That's basically how X-ray machines work. But that's quite. So I wonder what's actually in it. What's
I'm
it
getting
made
to
of?
that.
Sorry, go on, Rasa.
So here's they're not talking about much about it, but here's the little meme I made for this Crew Dragon, right?
Yeah.
So in the 1960s, you can travel 380,000 kilometers to the moon and just, take off your spacesuit and shave your face in the lunar orbit, But here's the Crew Dragon, and the Crew Dragon went up 380 kilometers. So they actually went higher than the Hubble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this 380 kilometers, this was just last year? So this was the highest any human being has ever flown. And how did they do that? Okay, so I've been searching through the SpaceX web pages trying to find out how they did this, and they've got some special proprietary materials. And they only tell you the name of it. The inner cavity of the ship is made out of a special 3D printed material called Inconel. And then the suits they're wearing are made out of another specially 3D printed material called Nomex. Okay, so they're not telling us how they actually made these materials, But this is they have a lot of special secrets here. But that's the special ship and the special spacesuits is what allows these astronauts to go up 380 kilometers, higher than the Hubble, anything NASA has done in the past. So and coming back to space.
Can I just ask, Raza, did they specifically keep these spacesuits on for the purposes of protection from radiation at 380 kilometers?
Yeah,
it wasn't just to look cool or something.
They look cool, don't they? Those ships, the suits, they look very film-like something out of Alien or something.
Yeah, but yeah. I did. So if that was the absolute reason they did it, then NASA have some explaining to do about the picture above.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm coming to the micrometeorites, because I mentioned this before, and when a couple of years ago when I did my first interview, I mentioned some numbers, but I was just taking those numbers off of Wikipedia, and since then Wikipedia has upgraded their numbers. So now I'm giving you the up-to-date numbers here. So micrometeorite travels, here's the speed, 39,600 kilometers per hour. Okay, this is the speed of the micrometeorites. All right, and how much micrometeorites? 40,000 to 20,000 tons per year. Okay, you can see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so also, it's not only that, they also have 50 tons per year of meteorites.
This is what hits
what
the
is the
Earth.
difference? Yeah, it hits Earth, hits the moon. So the difference between a micrometeorite and a meteorite is just basically the size. They mention, if it's above this size, it's a meteorite. If it's smaller than that size, it's a micrometeorite, right? So, if you just draw that line, anything below that line is a micrometeorite. Anything above that line, you've got 40 to 20,000 tons of micrometeorites, and you've got 50 tons per year of meteorites. So that's, if your ship gets hit by a micrometeorite, you might be okay, but if your ship gets hit by a meteorite, you're finished.
Mm.
So what is the SpaceX doing about this? Here's the picture of the SpaceX shielding on the outside of the ship. Okay, so there's these little hexagon plates which kind of snap on and snap off. And what are they made out of? It's called the phenolic impregnated carbon alligator X. That's the name for this material, these little hexagon panels. Okay, they're sticking on the side of the ship. Of course, they're not going to mention what it's made out of. It's a special kind of 3D printed carbon, again, so it protects not only from micrometeorites, it protects also from radiation and heat of re-entry. So now there's another Wikipedia page which is called active shielding, and this is used. So basically, one of the ideas they're talking about is they want to have like a robotic arm, and so if a micrometeorite hits your shield and it busts up one of these plates, there's a robotic arm that will reach around and replace that panel. That's kind of one of the ideas they have. If you actually get hit by a meteorite rather than a micrometeorite, it's going to bust that panel up. So they're thinking about having a little robot, a robotic arm that will crawl, or a robot that will crawl along the outside of the craft and can replace the panels. And they also have a very kind of a special glue, that glues it down, So these are some of the ideas that SpaceX is talking about in order to deal with the meteorite and the micrometeorite problem. Again, something which the Apollo missions never had to deal with. If you compare that to the Apollo mission, here's a 2-inch space between these 3 layers of aluminum. This is how they dealt with the typical micrometeorite protection. It's just laughable. Think that this tiny little few pieces of aluminum will actually protect from micrometeorites.
Considering that they would actually openly say that in the lunar module, if you dropped a screwdriver, it'd make a hole through the floor or something,
Yeah.
And if this worked for Apollo, then why? It seems quite a simple and lightweight and probably not very expensive way of protecting from meteorites. So why not just adapt it and perhaps modernize it slightly for the Artemis missions? Or it has to come up with something completely new and novel. It's
right. That's why we got the SpaceX is taking it seriously.
They're almost looking similar to the shuttle tiles, but a much more modern take on the shuttle tiles, aren't they?
Yeah. All right, so let's keep going. We've got now we're going to debunk the next thing. The third-party evidence for Apollo moon landings. So this is a lot of the debunkers always say, oh, we've got the ham radio operators. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that so much. The ham radio operators proves that they went to the moon. Okay. So we've got the third party. So this webpage, this Wikipedia page, third party evidence, there's a lot of different things here. And, it would take a whole nother show. We could go point by point and debunk all these things. But when you look at the ham radio proof, what is the third party ham radio proof? They've been editing this Wikipedia page now, and now all they have is this one Kettering Grammar School. Okay, a group of Kettering Grammar School used radio equipment, monitored both Soviet and U.S. spacecraft, calculated their orbits. According to the group, December 1972, a member picked up an Apollo on its way to the moon. Okay, first of all, if you have a ham radio, you have no idea where that signal is coming from. It's just signals bouncing around within Earth's atmosphere, So to say it picked up an Apollo 17 on the way to the moon, fortunately for them, they put quotes around it. Quote, picks up an Apollo on its way to the moon. Quote, it means like, at least they put quotes around that, because literally speaking, there's no way to know whether it was actually on its way to the moon or not with a ham radio.
Yeah.
So
also, it says on the way to the moon. It doesn't say landed on the moon.
I suppose that
right. So
they assume that, depending on when during the mission they picked up the radio.
Yeah.
It's just an assumption. If they picked it up at the beginning of the mission, they'll say, well, they're obviously on their way to the moon. If they picked it up near the end, well, they're obviously on their way back to Earth.
Yeah. That's the likeliest time when they're going to start trying to track them with ham radios, is when literally they're in the Earth orbit before they've gone TLI, because they kind of think, well, this is our best chance of picking up a signal because it's closer. So you can probably pick it up in orbit going around the Earth, like you could perhaps pick up people in Skylab at the time going around the Earth, but they're all still in the space. They're not actually on the moon.
So I'm going to go into that. Yeah. So this is a very famous article, this amateur radio, and this guy, Larry Basinger, eavesdropped on Apollo 11. And he built his own receiving dish. Okay, and so he made the news, and this was a big story. And it says here he recorded 35 minutes of the conversation of the Apollo missions. Yes, recorded 35 minutes, and he even recorded the phone call between Nixon. So he recorded. So why did he? Okay, so here's the question: why did he only able to record 35 minutes? Why did he not record to 3 hours or 6 hours? He was pointing his dish at the moon, right? But as I'm telling you, just because you point your dish at the moon does not mean anything. You can pick up all the signals which are bouncing around in the Earth's atmosphere. So why did he record 35 minutes? Because that's how long it took for the shuttle to pass from one horizon to the other.
Oh, in orbit, if it was in low Earth orbit.
It was in low Earth orbit, and that proves it. He only was able to record 35 minutes.
Oh my God, yeah.
If he was pointing his thing at the moon and he was tracking the moon, he could have recorded many, many hours of it.
Just to throw a curved spanner into that, I don't know, but in those days you probably would have recorded on reel-to-reel rather than cassette tape in 1969. I'm just wondering what the length of a reel-to-reel tape recorder, general spool, would be. Maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah,
you'd have to change. Could have put in another reel of tape or something, but maybe it's like they're expensive to come by. Me and Ben were talking about VHS tapes earlier on, how expensive they used to be in the late 70s and early 80s.
If you read how he built this thing, he took some army equipment and re-put it together. He took a receiver from an army tank, and he made his own antenna out of spare pieces of aluminum and nylon cord and chicken wire. So he rigged up this thing, you know, but the fact that he had all this Army tank equipment, I don't think that not having enough money for extra reel is a good excuse.
Maybe that's true. It's funny, actually, considering he's picked up all this from the moon using, you know, chicken wire and bits from an old army tank, whereas the Russians apparently had to lean on Jodrell Brank to try and pick up Apollo. You know that story, don't you, Ben?
They used to use the Parkes Radio Observatory in Australia.
Yeah. There's a guy here with a chicken wire set up, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that point later about how the Russians did it. So I'm going to keep going here. So now, as I mentioned, ham radio will not know the difference between a ship on the way to the moon or a ship in low Earth orbit. There's no way for ham radio to know where is that signal coming from. So in order to know where the signal is coming from, you need a Doppler radar. Then you can know where it's coming from. Okay, so let's look at this, the Doppler radar. So the Doppler radar was not something that a public had available. This was Army in the 19th, and if you look at it here, until the 1970s, they were very heavy, these Doppler radars. You know, there was limitations restricted it to aircraft, night use, heavy weather, heavy jamming environments, all the way up until the 1970s. And then during the 1970s, they invented this digital fast Fourier transform type of Doppler microprocessor for the Doppler radio. So that means after the Apollo missions, these Doppler radars became smaller. You know, now you see like the police can see how fast you're going with your car, right? But that's, you know, but back in the Apollo days, it's not something. This was only military equipment, you know. So no like kind of amateur guy could actually build this Doppler thing and know where the signal is coming from. Okay, but just in case some weird like mad scientist managed to build himself a Doppler radar so he could actually track the Apollo missions, how did NASA prevent third parties from spoofing Apollo communications? For a period of 5 days, from July 17 to July 21, the observatory, visitor center, and all access roads for several kilometers around the telescope were closed to the general public. So it means that during the Apollo missions, NASA would block off the area around their telescopes for several kilometers. Because say there was a mad scientist and he somehow managed to build his own Doppler radar, in order to track the Apollo missions, he would have actually had to gone to the observatory where and been aiming at the same direction where their dish is pointing. That would have been the only way to track it. So NASA actually took steps to prevent people from tracking the ships. It says here, you know, they drew perimeter around the dishes so nobody could get in. You have to have a special key tag to get in to the dishes at that time, you know. So the excuse that they're giving here is because if there would have been a guy with a Doppler thing, he could have jammed the signal, right? So that's the excuse they give. Oh, so they blocked off they drew a perimeter, they blocked it off. We don't want anybody to jam the signal. But really what they didn't want anybody to track the crafts.
Looks like it, yeah.
Okay.
Well, how about that?
That's interesting.
Very, yeah. That seems not awful. You should think they wouldn't mind if they were really going to the moon. In fact, they'd be very proud to put the public into the telescope to observe independently the Apollo rockets on their way to the moon and back.
So now coming into steps that NASA has taken to prevent people from finding out about Apollo. This is the Apollo. This is the law which was passed so that the Apollo landing sites are off limits. You know, one small step to protect human heritage in Space Act. So a lot of people have been talking about it. They don't know whether it actually was passed. Yes, it was passed on December 31st, 2020. It became a law. This law was passed. The Apollo landing sites are now off limits. Okay.
Is that all the Apollo sites? Because I'm sure someone said, oh, it's only Apollo 11 and Apollo 17.
No, all of them are protected
It covers all of
under
them.
this law.
Right. Okay.
This is, yeah, and there's obviously this is not enforceable. I mean, for instance, you can't exactly send the police up there, but also, it's not a sovereign territory of the United States. The moon is not a sovereign territory.
Say what you can and can't do. After all, they bloody well landed there without permission, didn't they? Who gave them permission to land in the first place?
I think, well, you could say that, but also, I know there are people pushing to have some kind of treaty, outer space treaty, regarding the sovereignty of other planets and things like that. And under this law, the Apollo sites would essentially become United States, not overseas, but extraterrestrial territories, when they can dictate who goes in and out.
Well, India and China has already photographed the landing site, so sorry. Because there was too late,
but also, do you remember the Google X Prize? The Google X Prize was where they literally wanted some independent people to design a space mission which would land a rover on Mars and allow it to unmanned rover, a bit like the Jade Rabbit one, and let it go 200 yards, and then the Google X would give them so much money. But that's when NASA stepped in and said that they must not land anywhere near the Apollo landing sites. The Google X Prize.
They canceled the whole.
Yes, they did.
Canceled the whole. All right, so I'm coming into another step which NASA is doing to protect its Apollo missions. And these are the PSYOPs. Okay, so we've got 6 major PSYOPs in order to discredit us, the moon landing researchers. Okay, so they're throwing in all these PSYOPs in order to lead people here and there, So these are the 6 PSYOPs. The first one was 2002, this French documentary, Operation Moonnet, which is all outstanding landings, And then you've got Donald Rumsfeld and what's that other guy?
Kissinger.
Henry Kissinger.
This was a mockumentary, wasn't it? It was
right. Mockumentary where they tried to pretend like it was not a joke, right?
Yeah, I saw that. It was meant to be a joke. It was meant to be a comedy. Yeah.
So anything coming out of Kissinger and Rumsfeld's mouth is a lie. Okay, you should know that off the bat.
Yeah.
And so they're just mocking us. And this whole theory about Kubrick filming it, that's where it began in 2002, and it's still going on today. They're releasing all these WikiLeaks article, WikiLeaks released Kubrick filming it, blah blah blah. This is all just trying to mislead, just to discredit us. That's why they're doing these things, And then the Secret Space came out in 2005. That's the whole theory of they actually went, but then they provided us fake film because they wanted to hide the existence of aliens on the moon.
That's Christopher Everard's film, isn't it?
Yeah.
See, I actually saw that, and I don't think he actually says exactly that. He says he actually is open to the idea that the moon landings were faked.
Right.
Everard.
Right, but he was the one who started this whole thing into motion. Now you have the Gaia. You have the Gaia mission, the Gaia disclosure, which is all about aliens, and they're officially promoting the aliens thing. And they even got Buzz Aldrin and another astronaut, talking about, I think I saw some crafts, So this is a huge. They've got a lot of money into this Gaia thing. But now that's I think it was 2008 in this, there was some alien conference, and that's when they put forward the theory that the Apollo footage was fake because they were hiding the existence of aliens. That came out in 2008.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I've heard people say that, which is of course untrue. It's not true. I mean, there may be aliens on the moon, but it's got nothing to do with. They're trying to say yes, but they did go there. But the fake stuff is because of that. Yeah.
Right, and then 2015, the Moonwalkers, the theory that they hired Kubrick to film this fake scene, but they didn't fail, so they didn't have to use that fake scene. You know,
I actually reviewed that film. I watched it. It's quite funny. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
But yeah, because one guy pretends to be Stanley Kubrick, and of course they're completely incompetent. They're trying to produce a fake moon landing. They're completely incompetent. However, in the end, like you say, in the end, the Apollo mission works anyway. So it's all superfluous.
Yeah. So the reason I'm talking about these psyops is because I have to deal with these every day. In my Facebook group, I get these trolls coming in. Oh, actually, they did go to the moon, and they made a fake film, but they didn't have to use it. And then I also get so many people talking about they did go, but the fake film is because of the aliens there. And every day I have to deal with people saying Kubrick filmed it, especially the next one, this 2015, the fake Kubrick confession.
Oh, yeah.
I can't tell you every day how many people post. People fall for these kind of psyops. And then the 2016 Operation Avalanche, another psyop where they circled the moon, but they didn't land. Right.
I remember that.
That's one. It's not a very popular psyop. I've never had many people in my group. I've never had any trolls saying that. You know, we circled, but we didn't land. But anyway, it was an attempted psyop. And then finally, the sixth psyop is the whole flat Earth. And I remember, when dealing with these flat earthers, especially 2016, 2017, they've been. Oh, I've been having to deal with these people.
Yeah. If Jara was here, his smoke would be coming out of his ears right now, wouldn't it? I mean, he hates this sort of thing.
So now I've actually tracked down the Kubrick connection. This is a very interesting article. This is the Kubrick connection. Okay, so in January 1965, there was a group of space writers in New York City. Two of them were Harry H.K. Lange and Frederick Ordway, and one was a previous NASA staff, and the other was they were both ex. Ordway was not only leading intellectual at NASA, but public relations. So this Ordway and Lange were in a club, and they were meeting with Arthur C. Clarke. Okay, so it says here, before Lange and Ordway could get in a cab, one of the club employees told Ordway that he had a phone call. It was Kubrick making a call and offering him to come work on 2001. So Kubrick called these two ex-NASA employees and said, come work with me on 2001. Okay, this is the actual Kubrick-NASA connection, was that Kubrick actually hired two ex-NASA employees to come help him on 2001. And this took place in January of 1965. And then a little bit later, down here at the bottom, this George Miller, the NASA's high ranking, came to Kubrick's studio set and he dubbed it the NASA East. Okay. He was so impressed by Kubrick's stage set that this George Miller of NASA called it NASA East. So you've seen this photo of Kubrick walking with the NASA employees, right? George Miller, guys. So this is the actual where it comes from. This is when George Miller came to visit.
It's interesting. I'd just like to make a comment on the whole Kubrick thing because it's very interesting. The fake Kubrick confession. I know a lot of people still believe it, even though the old man in the video, is very obviously not Stanley Kubrick. You can see quite clearly it's somebody different. But Vivian Kubrick, his daughter, Kubrick's daughter, she tweeted when that all came out, and what she said was very, very interesting because. I'd see if I can find the actual quote that she made because it's very, very interesting. The quote is very interesting. Let me just find it. So I won't keep you long, Rasa.
Whilst you're finding it, Ben, I'll just say what I know about this on the Kubrick front, because I watched Deep Thoughts Radio, which is, I'll put a link there in our video as well. And anyone that's listening from Deep Thoughts Radio, hello to everybody there. Very interesting YouTube channel. And the guy there, Mark, the host, talked about the fact that he's been talking to Stanley Kubrick's daughter, and she says there's no way Stanley Kubrick, her father, was involved in the Apollo fake moon landings, because she never left his side because of an illness she suffers as a child, and he was very loath to let her out of his sight because of this. I don't know what the illness was now, but it's quite a serious illness, and so he would always be with her. So she was always with him on the set, and that's how she ended up being in the film, playing the daughter of the main character, where she's talking to him through the kind of Skype thing, whatever it was.
She made a documentary about Shining as well. But this is, she says, surely an artist such as my father, whose profound degree of artistic integrity is self-evident, and she goes along about his political and social conscience. Would you think he'd be the last person ever to assist the US government in such a terrible betrayal of its people? And she carries on in this sense, but what she doesn't say, the interesting thing is not what she says, it's what she doesn't say. She never once says, but this is ridiculous, the moon landings were real, everyone knows that. She never says that. She never confirms or denies whether the moon landings were real or not. She just says, my father had nothing to do with it. And he went, I believe her. I mean, Kubrick, I think he was a man of principle. He was also good friends with Andrei Tarkovsky, the Russian filmmaker. And they wouldn't have wanted him comparing notes with someone in the Soviet Union, things like that. So I believe her. But it's interesting. She's not actually saying whether she believes the moon landings were real.
Yeah.
So also I want to mention that, I've been studying all these Apollo images and Apollo videos, and I've come to the conclusion that this so-called front screen projection was not used. It couldn't have been used, especially, because you've got these cameras panning around. So where are you going to put this front screen projection equipment? You can't. So they used the backdrops. That's how they did it. So this is the example of a backdrop. So obviously they didn't use the backdrop in Apollo 11. It was just a flat set they did it on. But here in Apollo 12, they use the backdrop. You can see here's the stage, this line here, and then this other side of the crater is a backdrop. So why they did this? Okay, so here you can see he's standing on the right side of the LEM, and here he's standing on the left side of the LEM, but the backdrop looks the same. So why did they? What it means is he was here, he took these pictures, and then he moved to the other side of the ship and he took these pictures, and in between that they slid the backdrop. They sliding the backdrop to here and they move it over to here. Nice. Why did they do that? They did that in order to fake perspective. Okay, this is a 300-meter crater called the Surveyor Crater. They landed next to the Surveyor Crater. And if you look on the Wikipedia, this is a 300-meter crater. So if you look at this, you can tell this is not a 300-meter crater, right? No. It's just, anybody who looks at this can see, oh, that's not you can see the shore over there. That's not 300 meters away. So in order to make it look like a 300-meter crater, they had to do this shifting perspectives. Oh, since it's 300 meters away, that 300-meter shore over here looks the same when you go to the other side of the ship because such a big crater. So that is how that was and they used this same trick on the later missions, especially Apollo 17, where they had the mountain backdrop and you're on one side of the ship and you go on the other side of the ship and the mountains look the same because they're just sliding the backdrop.
I was thinking of those, yeah.
So it actually has nothing to do with front screen projection. It's just a adjustable backdrop behind this stage set. And the first time they actually used it was on Apollo 12.
So the LEM there is to the right of the crater, and you've got like a little semi-crater just to the right of the dark patch there of the crater hole. And then the lem on the top picture appears to be the left of the crater. So is that a change in perspective, or have they moved the lem, or have they moved the backdrop incorrectly?
No. This is this one on the bottom is just a continuation. They didn't move the lem. It's the same stage set. So I'm going to follow the line. Here's the stage set. It comes down, it curves up, and then it comes down and it curves up here.
Yeah.
So this is just it's the same lem, same stage set. On one side, he's on this side of the lem, and on the other side, he's on that side of the lem.
Yeah.
But they had to change the backdrop.
And they moved the backdrop.
In order to make it appear like this opposite shore of the crater is 300 meters away.
Yeah.
So it's not, you just, you can tell when you go to the high res images, you can tell this is not a 300 meter crater. It's just pathetic how they tried to fake it by doing this shifting perspectives thing.
Yeah. Terabunda, I think, an astronomer who does videos on the Apollo fake landings, has talked about that perspective of craters and things like that, and he compares them to like Meteor Crater in Arizona, and the details of the rocks and things. You can hardly see any rocks there and things like that, but we can talk about that another time. But anyway, yeah.
All right, so I mentioned this in the last show about there's a spotlight behind the shadow of the as it lifts, and there's this Helium effect.
Yeah.
Right? And in the Apollo moon, American moon movie, they mentioned this, that NASA was trying to fake the helium effect. Right? Now that's a mistake, actually, because helium effect is created by moisture in the air.
Right.
Okay. If the sun is at your back and your camera is pointing down at the shadow, there's moisture in the air, and that will create this halo around around the shadow. So that's not possible on the moon.
Yeah, I've seen that when I'm on a plane. I've been on a plane and seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, you see it down on the clouds sometimes, don't you?
Yeah.
Right, because of the moisture.
Yeah.
So this is the wrong thing. So NASA made this new Wikipedia page. It's called Opposition Surge. This is a totally BS, a bogus excuse to explain the halo around the shadow. Say, no, it's not the Helix Jensen. It's this thing they call opposition surge, the Lambertian reflectance, and the reflective particles on the lunar regolith, the blah, 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 blah. It's total bogus. It's like, okay, they're trying to explain why there's a halo around his shadow. Okay. Hello. The halo is not just around the shadow. The halo is coming from a spotlight, So they just debunk themselves. This is not a guy looking at his shadow, the spotlight effect is caused by a spotlight, So this whole opposition surge, this Wikipedia page they created, is just a total lie, It's just a total lie. So coming back to this Helium effect. So I found this really interesting video on YouTube where this guy has a drone, right? Yeah. And the drone is filming this halo, and a lot of the NASA people will use this as evidence, to debunk. Like last time I talked about the halo around the shadow, and they using, I was attacked by trolls ever since that last video, and they're using this as a proof that no, it's actually Helium effect, which it's not, because Helium would require there to be moisture in the air. But anyway, the interesting thing about this YouTube video is you see this drone, it goes down and it comes up. It comes closer to the ground and then it lifts up into the air when you watch this video. And the interesting thing is, when the shadow you watch its shadow. When the drone is close to the ground, the shadow is really big, and as the drone lifts up into the air, the shadow gets smaller. Okay?
Mm.
So you see that on the Apollo liftoff. But the problem is, on the Apollo liftoff, the shadow gets small too slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So here, when you watch this drone do it, he's close to the ground and then he lifts up and the shadow gets small really quickly. So there's actually mathematics behind this. The distance to the light source the farther away the light source is, the quicker your shadow will get smaller. So the fact that on these Apollo liftoff, the shadow is getting small quite slowly is an indication of a close light source. And there's actually mathematics to prove this, you know. I'm not going to go into that now, but it's a very interesting point, you know, because I was attacked by debunkers, you know, since that last video, and they're saying, no, this can't have been faked, blah, blah, blah. And so I've been doing a lot of research on this, and now I've seen that this is the proof that they're trying to give me that it was real actually proves that it was a fake. You know?
Well, it's backfired.
Yep. All right. So speaking of Wikipedia, this comes from this third-party proof of the Apollo missions. And here is the official name calling, okay? For those few misguided souls, he's talking about us, you know, we're misguided souls, you know, cling to the belief that the moon landings never happened, and they're delusional rejections. So they're calling us delusional, and they're calling us misguided souls, okay? So
That's
this is
politer than
name
usual.
calling.
Yeah.
So this is name calling. This is name calling. So this is pretty pathetic that NASA has to resort to name calling in order to try to discredit us. Can I keep going, Ben?
Yeah, it's of course James Oberg, who was commissioned by NASA to write a book debunking us. He called us cultural vandals. It's typical to use rhetoric and ad hominem attacks against people they know have a point. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to.
Mm. So, speaking of misguided souls, this is a temple in London, the Grand Lodge of London. Okay, so this comes from their webpage. I'm going to read this. In 1723, completion of the Grand Lodge in London, they written the Constitution of the Freemasons, the first public document. And so the Freemasons came out publicly, and the Constitution, this is the Constitution, was passed down from the previous Grand Master, Duke of Montagu, to the next Grand Master, Philip the Duke of Wharton. So this is a drawing they made of that historic occasion of the first Constitution of the Freemasons. And in this picture, you see they love their pillars and their checkerboard floors. And here in the back is the parting of the Red Sea. And on their webpage, it says the parting of the Red Sea represents a safe passage to the promised land where scientific values blend with stonemason philosophy and leads to a spiritual transcendence. And on the top is the Greek sun god Apollo, riding in his 4-chariot horse, symbolizing the unfolding of the divine heavenly plan. So this is why Freemasons love Apollo, the sun god. And they also love his sister, Artemis, the moon goddess. So this is why these Freemasons love Apollo. Now, here we've got, this is coming from a Freemason webpage. These were the people involved with the Apollo missions. So we've got 14 publicly admitted Freemasons here that were a part of the Apollo hoax. And these were just the publicly admitted ones, you know, because back then in the 60s, you know, most Freemasons were secret Freemasons. Nowadays, Freemason is not very secret anymore. You've got Freemasons YouTube channels, and they're very proud of the fact that they're Freemasons. But back in the 60s, most Freemasons were quite silent about it. The fact that we could find 14 of them in the Apollo missions who were proud enough to publicly admit they were Freemasons, they weren't very, they weren't like, at the time in the 1960s, they weren't like, yeah, I'm a Freemason. Buzz was showing his ring, but like these guys, most of these guys weren't like very public about it. It's not until later that the Freemasons they're showing how proud they were of these Apollo crew members that were Masons. So there may have been others, but these are just the 14 that they admit to. Okay. So now we're coming into the thing about why did the Russians not blow the whistle? This is the most common excuse that the debunkers like to say. All right, so you can't say, it would be hard to say that the Russians were also Freemasons, because during the time of the Soviet Union, Freemason was supposedly banned, right? That's the story they go into, is that, Freemasonry was banned during the Soviet Union. Now, I personally doubt that's true, but anyway, let's just accept that as true for a while, and let's come here. Operation Paperclip, everybody knows that. 1,600 German scientists were brought to America. But there was also Operation Ostavihim, right? It was the Russian version of Operation Paperclip, and they took 2,200 Nazis. So at the end of World War II, they just went into Germany and they started picking up German scientists, and they divided it. Some of them will go to Russia and some of them will go to America. Yeah. So in order to answer the question, why did the Russians not blow the whistle? You really need to watch this video, Anthony C. Sutton. And Anthony Sutton is just one of the most incredible historians ever lived. He spent all of his time, lived in the library, basically. And, he wrote 2 books, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, Wall Street and the Rise of Communism. And these books are just essential reading for anybody who wants to understand the situation on this planet and economics and politics. You must read these books. And if you don't have time to read the books, at least you can do is watch this 40-minute interview with Anthony C. Sutton on YouTube. Okay, so this is essential.
Can I mention, Rasa, that these are quite big books, but he's done a compilation, a smaller compilation called National Suicide, which is a very, very good book. I mean, if you haven't got time to read the 2 big ones, then just read National Suicide by Anthony Sutton, because it's excellent. Yeah.
And he's done a couple of other books, So this is kind of a background. I'm telling you, if you haven't seen this YouTube video, you definitely should. To really, and so I'm going to go into more detail here, what he talking about. So why did the Russians not blow the whistle? Well, here's a very simple picture. Here's a 1967 photo of Johnson meeting with the Soviet leader Kosygin before the hoax. And here's the 1973 photo of Nixon meeting with the Brezhnev after the hoax, and they're all drinking together. Yeah, we pulled it off, So, the whole idea of a Cold War, these guys were, like debating, here they are discussing, okay, we're going to pull off this hoax. And then after the hoax, yeah, they're partying. So that's a simple enough proof, that the Russians were not going to blow the whistle on it.
Yeah, it's also in there. There's several other reasons. Okay, so carry on.
If you want to say.
I was going to say there's other reasons as well. I think we discussed them before, but I explained how it's quite likely that it was in the interest of both nations for America to be seen to catch up. Because to make the space race essentially a better sell for the people to raise funds and things like that.
Yeah. All right. So here's Masonic history. Lyndon Baines Johnson passes away today on January 22nd. Today in Masonic history, the Masons were very proud of Lyndon B. Johnson. Okay. And this is the Masonic Temple in Alexandria, Virginia. Vice President Richard Nixon. The Knights Templar room was dedicated in 1957 by the Vice President Richard Nixon. Okay, so here we go. You know, you've got Johnson, a Mason, Nixon, a Mason. You know, both of them are hiding it, but I found evidence that they were. Now, this is my point. Okay, this is something I made, and I'm going to have to go through this in order to really understand and answer the question, why did the Russians not blow the whistle? So this is a historical chart, and I break it down into 3 sections. Number 1, LBJ, Nixon, the Soviets, and the politics of the space race. Part 1, getting Kennedy out of the picture, getting Johnson into the picture. Part 2, getting ready to fake the moon landings. Part 3, filming the moon landings at the Cannon Air Force Base. So I'm going to mention here that in the movie American Moon, they made sort of a mistake here. In American Moon, they said that NASA figured out they had to fake it in 1965, and then they had a meeting with the Russians in 1967, and they made an agreement not to blow the whistle. That is according to American Moon. Now, in my research, I have found that is not correct. So what happened was NASA knew they had to fake it in 1962, and NASA had a meeting with the Russians in 1965. And now for most of the remainder of this I'm going to prove this to you. I've got all documented evidence to prove what I'm saying here. So let me zoom in, and then I'm going to read this thing. Okay, part 1, getting Kennedy out of the picture, getting Johnson in the picture. Okay, not only would Kennedy not have approved of the Vietnam War, Kennedy was putting pressure on NASA to put a man on the moon. So let's go through the timeline here. 1957, October 4, Sputnik 1. Soviets put the first satellite. America was the losers. They're way behind. Okay. 1958, February 1 and March 26, Explorer 1, Explorer 3, the first proof of the Van Allen belt, right? 1958, August 27 and to September 6th. Argus 1, Argus 2, and Argus 3. 3 attempts to blow a hole in the Van Allen belts. These were the nuclear bombs. The first 3 set of nuclear bombs to try to blow a hole in the Van Allen belt. It didn't work. 1958, December 6th, the Pioneer 3. Final proof of the Van Allen belts. Okay. So in 1958, the Van Allen belts are the problem. 1961, April 12th, Yuri Gagarin went into orbit. America was the losers, losing the race. 1961, the Bay of Pigs. Uh-oh. Kennedy looks very bad after this Bay of Pigs. That was a CIA attempted, I guess you could call it attempted coup. They wanted Kennedy out. They wanted to start this Cold War, and it made Kennedy look bad. Kennedy needed to save face. So then what happened? After April 17 with the Bay of Pigs, May 25, Kennedy announces to Congress that he's going to put a man on the moon. Yeah, he needs to look good again because Bay of Pigs made him look bad. Okay, after Kennedy made this announcement to Congress, in 1962, July 9, Starfish Prime, one last attempt to blow a hole in the radiation belt. Didn't work. So what happened? On 3 days later, July 11, 1962. Von Braun's space station was canceled. Von Braun's space station was canceled. This is NASA's way of admitting they had to fake it. Okay? What it means is von Braun knew that the only way to go to the moon was to send a heavy, heavy craft, and that craft had to refuel at the space station, and then he could go to the moon. Von Braun knew that. But on July 11, 1962, von Braun, his plan was scrapped. No more space station, just go directly to the moon. It's called the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous Plan was adopted. So I'm going to prove this later. That's what I'm saying is they knew they had to fake it in 1962. I'm going to show you documented evidence of that. What happened after that? September 12, Kennedy's speech. We choose to go to the moon in this decade. Okay, November 21. There was a heated debate between Kennedy and James Webb. James Webb was the head of NASA at the time. James Webb kind of approached Kennedy and, kind of tried to talk some reason into him. Are you sure? Are you sure that you really want to get to there by the end of the decade? And Kennedy gets very, very upset about this. I just gave you so much money. Don't tell me you can't do it. So this is you can listen to this debate between Kennedy and James Webb on the YouTube. I'm going to show you that link. Okay, 1963, November 22nd, Kennedy assassination. Now, I'm not saying that that the reason they assassinated Kennedy is because he wasn't going to play along with the fake moon landings, but he was putting pressure on. They assassinated Kennedy for other reasons. Primarily this he's trying to end the Fed. Issuing the silver certificate, new money. That was the big final straw for Kennedy. They weren't going to have him for much longer. 1964. Okay, so Johnson, and as soon as Kennedy was gone, Johnson was the stand-in president, and Johnson wanted to win the election. So in order to win the election on July 2nd, Johnson passes the Civil Rights Act. Yes, America was happy. They had been fighting over civil rights for so long. And Johnson finally passed the Civil Rights Act, and that basically ensured that he would win the next election. So what happens after July 2nd? Okay, on August 2nd, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We got to get ready to send Americans to the Vietnam War. And the other final thing, on October 14th, these two Soviet leaders, Brezhnev and Kosygin, they are put into power in the Soviet Union. Okay, there's a whole story here how the previous one was taken out and these two guys were put in, and so that's a whole nother thing. But they were all buddies. And finally, then on November 3rd, Johnson is elected. Okay, so now the stage is set. Okay, Brezhnev and Kosygin in, Johnson is in, the stage is set. November 3rd, 1964, the stage is set. Okay, so what happens is Johnson goes to meet the Russians. Okay, and he is going to, sorry. Let me try to get back to my thing.
Sometimes it's a slow response on these things.
Yeah. No problem. I can just cut that out.
Yeah, we can cut that out. It's okay.
All right. So here we go. Getting ready to fake the moon landings. Johnson meets with the Soviets and asks them not to interfere with the Vietnam War. However, they needed to maintain the appearance of a Cold War going on. A deal was made where America would let the Soviets win the nuclear arms race, and the Soviets would let America win the race to the moon. The Soviets would not blow the whistle on the fake moon landings, and America would stop producing nuclear weapons, allowing the Soviets to pass them. All space technology was shared equally, but America would let Soviets remain ahead in the space race all the way up until the end. And they would pull off a surprise victory by being the first to put a man on the moon. So during this time, the Soviets were going to be focusing their energy on the 1975 space station meeting. Okay, so I'm saying in 1964 that was decided. Okay, we're gonna let you continue winning the space race all the way up until the end, where we get the first man on the moon. And while that's going on, we want you to get ready for the 1975 space station. So I'm telling you, this meeting happened in 1964, and I'm going to prove that. So let's keep going. What happened in 1965? Operation Rolling Thunder. Yeah, here we go. America's getting ready to start send troops to the Vietnam War. And America stops nuclear arms production. Just like they said, we're going to let the Soviets win the nuclear arms race, and America's going to win the space race. Okay, March 18, Vashkod 2. Okay, Russia faked an EVA, a spacewalk. Okay, that's what they said. America said, we want you to continue winning this, or create the appearance that you're still winning the space race. Okay, all the way up until the end when we pull off the surprise victory. So Russia's like, what, you want us to do an EVA? We can't do an EVA. So just fake it. Okay, so here we got, in 1965, the first Russian spacewalk was a fake. I'm going to prove that. And then June 3rd, Gemini 4. Okay, now the Americans this was a real spacewalk. But they were behind the Russians, you know. Still, the Russians were leading because they got their first spacewalk. Okay, January 1st, 1966. Werner von Braun takes a trip to Antarctica to find moon rocks. Yeah, getting ready. February 3rd. Luna 9. The Russians makes their first soft landing on the moon. Now, that was not a fake. I'm pretty sure that they did that. But the point is, they were sharing technology, and America allowed them to land first on the moon. Okay, February 22nd, Cosmos 110. This was where they supposedly sent the dogs into the Van Allen belt. Okay, and then the dogs came back, and the dogs survived. So that means the Van Allen radiation belts are not so bad. But they didn't even go to the Van Allen belts. Anyway, we'll come to that later. On April 3rd, Luna 10. Russia puts the first probe into lunar orbit. Yeah, the Russians won again. Okay, June 2nd, Surveyor 2, the U.S. first soft landing on the moon. Oh, America came in second place again. August 10, Lunar Orbiter 1. America put the first probe into lunar orbit. Oh, but too bad, they were second place again. Okay, let's keep going. 1967, January 27, Apollo 1, the fire that killed Gus Grissom. 1967, April 27, Thomas Barron was killed when a train hit his car, getting those guys out of the way. 1967, May 19, the Soviets signed the Outer Space Treaty, but they won't come to agreement on the Unispace Agreement. Okay, the Outer Space Treaty was like, okay, it was regarding if there's an accident, we're going to try to help you rescue astronauts. They signed that one, but they didn't sign the Unispace Agreement because there's a Cold War going on. You know, they can't be friends to go that far and sign this Unispace. And then again, June 10, the Soviet Union breaks ties with Israel at the end of the Six-Day War. The whole nother subject, you know, you got the USS Liberty incident, you know, where the Israel bombed the U.S. ship, and the Russians were sitting there watching it with their submarine and said nothing. And Russia breaks, at the end of the Six-Day War, Russia breaks ties with Israel. This was, again, just a fake thing in order to create an appearance of a Cold War. You know, they had to continue this appearance of a Cold War going on. Now, here it is. Okay, in Bart Sibrel's book, there was a whistleblower who says that the Apollo 11 was filmed at the Cannon Air Force Base. Bart doesn't mention the date. What he just said, it happened in 1968. He doesn't mention the date, so I'm giving a date to this thing, and you're about to see why I'm giving it this date. So it happened here, just at the beginning of 1968. So in order to go ahead and film the fake moon landings, one last thing had to be taken care of. Nixon had to be told not to blow the whistle. Okay? Johnson tells Nixon that he will step down, and thus allowing Nixon to win the presidency. And the plans were made so that the Vietnam War can continue, and the American public would still think Nixon was great because he was the president who put the man on the moon. Nixon agreed to this. Okay, I'm not going to blow the whistle that it's fake. And so they went ahead and they went to the Cannon Air Force Base and they filmed the Apollo 11 scenes. So let's go into here. 1968, LBJ announces that he won't run for presidency anymore. On March 31st, LBJ is not going to run for presidency. On July 1st, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Johnson is a hero. Yes, we signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty with the Russians. Yes. And then so because everybody was protesting the Vietnam War, so then Johnson became sort of like a hero. Okay, at least we got this Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty signed. Then on September 14th, the Zond 5. This is when the turtles orbited the moon.
I think it's tortoises, actually.
Yeah, tortoises.
Tortoises. Definitely tortoises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, August 8th, Nixon announces his candidacy. Yes, I'm running for presidency. Okay, October 11, Apollo 7 fakes a live docking scene in order to get the public inspired about the Apollo missions, okay? Everybody was upset about the Vietnam War, and then all of a sudden Apollo, you see this great thing, but it's a fake scene. You know, if you watch the Apollo thing on YouTube, you can tell it's a fake. So this was Apollo 7 was NASA's first, they're getting ready to fake the moon landings, so they faked Apollo 7. October 26th, Soyuz 3. Soviets make their first space station. October 31. So that means, okay, Soviets are saying, yes, we're going to be able to do this space station thing. So then a few days later, October 31, Johnson announces that he will stop the Vietnam War. Oh, the public is inspired. Okay. And then everybody is like getting ready for Nixon. You know, the public's a little bit happy. Johnson said the Vietnam War stopping. And then November 5, Nixon is elected. Okay. Of course, Nixon had to be elected because he was the one who was going to not blow the whistle on the fake moon landings. So here we go, December 24, 1968, Apollo 8 fakes the moon orbit. Yes, the public is inspired. Yes, America's great. Okay, we're going to do this Apollo thing. And so their mind is totally off of the Vietnam War anymore. Okay, 1969, January 14th, the Soyuz 4, Soyuz 5. The Soviets are making a big success for the space station. And then the July 20, Apollo 11. Americans are inspired. Yes, we put the man on the moon. Who cares about the Vietnam War? All right. So this is my, this is my theory about about the whole timeline. You know, when did they fake it? Or how did they know they were going to fake it? How all the pieces of the puzzle were put into place.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to attempt to prove all these points that I just made. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here we go. Here's the 1955 Warner von Braun in his space station. You know, he's saying, yes, we're going to have to dock the ship. If we want to go to the moon, we're going to have to dock the ship and refuel it at the space station. Then what happens? In 1962, here's a video of Warner von Braun showing the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, the command module and the LEM. You know, he was not happy about this because he wanted to go to the moon. And he knew that this Lunar Orbit Rendezvous was not working. It's not possible to protect the astronauts from the radiation, but he had to play along with it. So here he is in 1962 saying that, okay, we're not going to do the space station anymore. Here we go. I'm going to prove that. This plant, in 1961, the president called upon NASA to put a man on the moon. Space station development was put on the back burner. The Apollo became the landing spacecraft, and NASA opted for the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous in July of 1962. Okay, I'm proving these points I'm saying. Here it is, the actual date. 20 months later, on July 11, 1962, after much technical debate and infighting, Siemens, the NASA administrator James Webb, announced during press conference that Lunar Orbit Rendezvous had been selected for the primary mission mode. You know, they're going to do this Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. So basically, this is NASA knew that they had to fake it. In July 11, 1962, basically NASA is admitting that we're going to have to fake it. They knew that there was no way to get a man to the moon to protect them from the radiation by 1970, you know, by the end of the decade. It's not going to happen. So here they are in 1962, basically admitting that they're going to have to fake it. And you have this technical debate and infighting. That means Warner von Braun was not happy about it. He was like, no, I really want to go to the moon and I want the space station. So he's fighting. No, sorry, we're going to have to fake it. It's not going to happen. And eventually Warner von Braun gave in. So here it is, November 21, 1962. This is the interview between James Webb and Kennedy. So you should really listen to this because it's a heated debate, you know. This is the James Webb is trying to appeal to Kennedy. Okay, you know, let's be flexible. I don't think that the end of the decade is possible. Of course, James Webb doesn't admit that. He's just trying to like get Kennedy to budge a little bit. And Kennedy's like, no, I'm not budging. You know, you must, I gave you so much money, you have to do it. You know, so this is a very interesting interview to listen to. And here's the YouTube if you want to find it. Now, this is interesting. This is the Ranger program. So here in the 1962, NASA missed the moon. Again, 1962, it failed. 1962, Ranger 5 missed the moon. Okay, in the 1962, they couldn't even hit the moon, you know? They couldn't even hit it. Why could they not hit it? Okay, it was discovered that the type of diode used in the previous missions was produced problematic gold flaking in the galactic cosmic radiation was messing up the diodes on the ship, so they couldn't steer the ship properly. That was discovered in 1962. So then they started changing their diodes, and then finally at the 1964, the Ranger 6, at least they made the impact with the moon, you know, but the cameras failed. But then later, then again, just after that, in 1964, Ranger 7, mission accomplished. You know, they were taking video and images of the craft as it was slowly crashing, you know, as it was in orbit and slowly going down towards the lunar surface. So this is when they got nice pictures of the lunar surface in 1964, and they had the diode problem solved. Now, here we go. As I mentioned, 1965 was the agreement between America and the Russians. Don't blow the whistle. We are going to let you win the nuclear arms race, and we're going to win the space race. So this is the proof of it, you know. As I mentioned, we're going to let you win the nuclear arms race, and we're going to just stop producing nuclear weapons, and we're going to start decreasing our nuclear weapons supply. So that happened in 1965, as I mentioned. Okay, here it is. Just after that agreement, here's the Russia's first spacewalk, right? And you can tell it's a fake because of the studio lighting.
Mm-hmm.
The reflection.
Bigger than the normal lights,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So this is you can see it's just he's just dangling on a string, you know, and this in the background is a video of the Earth spinning by. So, you know, the theory that the Russians would have blown the whistle when the Russians themselves were faking it is just ridiculous. Okay. What happened after that? Von Braun goes to the Antarctic to pick up the moon rocks. Yep, in the winter. You know, winter of it means the winter of 1966 would be the summer in Antarctica. And then while Von Braun was down in Antarctica, what was going on? Okay, here it is. February 22nd, the dogs. Oh, the dogs went to the Van Allen radiation belt. It says the 2 dogs showed severe dehydration and weight loss and muscle loss, not coordinated. It took them several weeks to recover. Okay, but they survived. The dogs survived the Van Allen belt. Wait a minute. It's only 882 kilometers high. Means they didn't even go to the Van Allen belt, right? So here it is. This is basically the Russians are lying, saying, okay, the dogs survived the Van Allen. They didn't even go to the Van Allen. Now, what's next? Here's Johnson. Johnson is, you know, here's the lunar landing. You know, Johnson visits the NASA, says, how's your lander going? You know, you're going to have to fake it. You're going to have to convince the public that this thing can fly. So they were doing all these flight tests, you know, in the Arizona desert. And and then they moved it later to Texas. But anyway, Johnson came and inspected, you know, how's the faking it thing going? You know, how's your lunar lander going? Now, this is the Cannon Air Force Base. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Cannon Air Force Base. Now, it's hard. You cannot get, you know, you can't go to like Google Images and get the high detailed what's going on at the Cannon Air Force Base because it's off, you know, it's a top secret thing. But I managed to get a couple pictures of it. So this is the runway. There's a couple runways here. And behind the runway, it's called restricted areas. Okay. So that means even if you're military personnel, you're working at this Air Force base, you go to the other side of the runways and you go down and there's a fence here. Nope, you're not allowed. This is all, very few people have access to this restricted areas here. And what's there? There's this big hangar. Okay, here's the runways and here's the big hangar, the Cannon Air Force Base. This is where they filmed the Apollo 11 moon landings. Okay. Here's the highway. This is the highway from Texas to New Mexico. And you take this exit, you can enter into the Cannon Air Force Base, but you know, you're not going to get access here if you're not a military. And then what's over here? A golf course. Yep, Cannon Air Force Base golf course. And what do we have? We have Johnson and Nixon playing golf together. You know, this picture is not at the Cannon Air Force Base, But anyway, golf is where politicians meet.
And they also play it on the moon.
Yeah. Now, Zon 5. Here we go. The Russians are lying. The tortoises underwent biological changes, and it was concluded that these were primarily due to starvation. They were not affected by the space travel. This is a lie, okay? The Russians were lying, okay? The tortoise can survive many, many months without food. They do that every winter. They go into hibernation, they stop eating, and they can even stop breathing. Sometimes the ice covers their body and their body freezes and their heart even stops. But then at the end of the winter, when it thaws out, they start breathing, they start eating again. So how can you mention that the tortoises died due to starvation, or that they were affected by the whole thing is just a ridiculous lie, They were affected by the radiation. Okay. Luna 16. Now this is after the Apollo missions, or after Apollo 11. But I'm just pointing out one more last point here. According to the Bochum Observatory in Germany, strong, good quality television pictures were returned from the Luna 16 spacecraft. Okay, wait a minute. The Bochum Observatory in Germany is in West Germany. It's not in East Germany. Okay, so that means I'm just proving to you that whatever the Americans were doing, the Russians knew about it. Whatever the Russians were doing, America knew about it, and all of Europe as well. They're all, they can catch the same television signals coming from all the crafts. There was no secrets going on. And this is just proof of that. That the Bochum Observatory was also receiving the signals from Luna 16, the Russian. This is the EU. This is the European Space Agency receiving the signals from a Russian craft,
Mm-hmm.
So what are you talking about keeping secrets? There was no secrets there. All right. So this is I've kind of proven my points about the 1962 is when they knew they had to fake it, and 1965 was when they made an agreement with the Russians that not to blow the whistle. And as I mentioned, you should watch the video of the Wall Street and the rise of Hitler,
yeah.
Wall Street rise of the Bolsheviks. You need to watch this. So I'm going to take that a step further, and I'm going to show you my own research here. And this is going to, talking about was there a Cold War going on? Let's look at these are just dates. These are just dates, and I'm going to read through. Okay. In 1958, the Dutch Republic declared their independence, and in 1602, the Dutch East India was founded and the world's first private central bank. Next step, invade England. Okay, so in 1649, the Dutch sent Oliver Cromwell to England, and the King Charles I was executed. And by 1694, the first Bank of England was created. Next step, go to France. In 1789, the French Revolution began, and in 1793, King Louis the 16th was executed. And by 1800, the Bank of France was created. Next step, Italy. In 1848, the Italian War of Independence, and by 1870, the Italian unification movement had taken all of Italy and finally had taken Rome. And by 1893, the Bank of Italy was created. Next step, go to America. In 1907, the bankers created the Panic of 1907, which crippled America economically, and by 1913, the Federal Reserve Bank was created in America. Next step, go to the Soviet Union. In 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution launched, and the Tsar Nicholas II of Russia was forced to abdicate. And the same year, the Bank of Russia was created. Then next step, go to Germany. 1918 was the founding of the Weimar Republic, and the Kaiser Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate. And the same year, the German Reichsbank was created. Then the final step, Spain. In 1931 was the abdication of Alfonso XIII, leading to the Spanish Civil War of 1936. And by 1939, the Bank of Spain was created. So what I'm saying here is these bankers, beginning with the Dutch, by 1939, they had created their new world order. The one world, the global, the whole world, they basically controlled the whole world. Once they had these countries, they basically had the whole world. So to talk about a Cold War, you got between America and the Soviet Union, it's the same bankers controlling the Bank of Russia and the Bank of America. So, but what happened? In 1949, Chairman Mao nationalized the banks of China, created the People's Bank of China, a national bank. So Chairman Mao was the first one to break this new world order. The bankers had the control of the whole world, and including China, all the way up until 1949. And here's the proof that Chairman Mao nationalized the Bank of China in 1949. Why did he do that? This is a pre-1949 money of China. Okay, so in 1949, you could have 1,000 RMB and not buy a loaf of bread because the bankers had devaluated their currency. Okay, that was why Chairman Mao knew that he had to nationalize the bank. He had to kick out these private bankers. And who were they? It says right here on the Chinese says it says Citibank. Citibank, owned by the IBC Bank at that time, later was purchased by Rockefeller and became part of the Chase Manhattan Bank. So here it was. Before 1949, Citibank owned the private National Bank of China. Yep, here's a proof of that. And that's why they nationalized the banks. Now, this is a Wikipedia page, which a lot of people should read because a lot of people will debate this with me. You know, they'll say, no, China is still part of the New World Order. And the Rothschilds own the Chinese bank. No, here it is. Okay. In this book called Currency War, this book is essential reading for every member of the Chinese government. You cannot be a member of the Chinese government unless you've read this book. And what does it say in this book? It says the Federal Reserve is not a Department of State function, but it is a part of the private banks operated by private sector, and these private banks all over the world are loyal to the Rothschild family. Okay, this is written in the book that every Chinese person has read. Okay, and President Kennedy was assassinated. You know, they go into 9/11, everything. You know, China is not stupid. They know that this is not conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact. You know, here in China, everybody knows that the problem in the world is the private central banks. And that's why, you know, this is a proof, you know, that even here, you know, even this is Wikipedia, so they're going to say, oh, this is just conspiracy. You know, these Chinese are conspiracy theorists. You know, that's what the Wikipedia says, of course. But, you know, here in China, this is not conspiracy theory. This is fact. You know, this is the proven fact. To say that the world is being run by these private central bankers is not a theory. This is a provable fact. Okay. Now, I'm coming into the suppression of free energy devices.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here it is on Wikipedia. Proof of the suppression of free energy devices. This is called the EM drive. It's called and they like to call it the impossible drive. So here it is. It says a result. They said that, okay, NASA reported to have a success with this, but the result was not since been replicated. And subsequent studies have indicated that the thrust observed was measurement error, caused by interactions with the Earth's magnetic field, blah, blah, blah. No other published experiment has measured apparent thrust greater than the experimental margin of error. In March 2021, physicists at the Dresden University of Technology published 3 papers claiming that all results showing thrust were false positive, explained by outside forces. So here is suppression of a free energy technology, and this ties in directly with NASA. Okay, so I'm going to if you don't mind, I'm going to read you a little timeline of how this thing was suppressed. Okay, so there was a company called SPR, and they created the first EM drive in 2002. And then in 2000, but it was getting hot. So then they proposed a cooling system for it. And they said, okay, we found a way to keep it cool. But in 2006, as soon as they did that, the scientific community started saying, whoa, wait a minute, you're talking about a free energy device. This is not possible. So they started suppressing it in 2006. In 2009, Boeing, the American company Boeing, invested in the EM drive. But then in 2012, they claimed they dropped it. They said, no, we're not involved in that project anymore. In 2014, there was some other, the American media started attacking some scientific journals. There were some other scientists who had been experimenting with this, and they started seeing positive results. And the American media started attacking the scientific journals for even publishing these things. And then finally in 2015 was the first scientific article debunking the EM drive. In 2016, that company, SPR, who had invented it, they decided, okay, we're going to go private. We're going to go private. We're not going to be part of the government anymore. We're going to continue experimenting with these in private. And then also in 2016, NASA also got involved, and they reported a positive result. And even NASA got criticized in 2016 for reporting reporting positive results on this EM drive. And then also Boeing, some members of the Boeing staff, even though they claimed they had dropped it, were still experimenting with it, and some of their people reported positive results. And the Boeing, the company, denied that. No, we didn't report any positive results. And then a satellite, also in 2016, a satellite was sent up with one of these EM drives in it to see if they actually could get propulsion in space. So the satellite went up, but the results were not published. Finally, in 2016, China got involved, and they said, no, we want to invest in this thing as well. So China gets involved in 2016. In 2017, China reported successful testing of the EM drive. In 2018 was the second scientific article debunking the EM drive. In 2019, some of the members of NASA wanted to continue experimenting with EM drive, so they actually quit NASA and went to go work for that private company. And then in 2021, as it said here, this was the third and final debunk of the EM drive, and all these scientists in Germany are saying, no, 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 this thing does not work. This thing does not work. So this is a suppressed free energy technology. And I'm telling you, this thing works because we have it here in China and it does work. So this is part of the, I could go into a long subject about, free energy devices because that's my specialty and how it's been suppressed,
And on that point, there is an interview, I believe, with Ben and you on Ben's Hipanwa show. So we can put a link for that.
Yeah. So this is my area of research. This was an article of 2009. It's called a spin battery. Physicists develop a new battery using a new source of energy. Now, this is the quantum energy which I spoke about. This came from the University of Miami in 2009, and this was suppressed. So what happened was these scientists who published this article, they were told, okay, you messed up. Do not use the words new source of energy. You cannot use these words new source of energy. So they said, they didn't get fired or anything, but what happened, they said, we're going to give you money to develop a new kind of computer, a new kind of computer memory called spintronics, okay? So as long as you continue to develop spintronics and this quantum computer, then you can continue working with us. But if you go around talking about you've discovered a new source of energy, which breaks the law of conservation of energy, you're going to lose your jobs, So this is my field of research, and I have quite a long history in this subject. Before I started talking about the moon landing, I had quite a name for myself in the free energy community. I had been interviewed, and I was involved with the technology, which was suppressed. It was in Canada, and a lot of debunkers came and attacked me. This was back in 2008, 2009. If you search my name, you can even find the debunker articles where they criticizing me. Mm-hmm. So I have some experience, and I know several other people who have experienced suppression of this free energy technology. Even one of my friends was killed a couple years ago. Oh. But and that was in South Korea. But anyway, and I tried to tell my friend, I said, don't do this in South Korea. I said, you come to China, then you'll be safe. But he didn't listen to me. So anyway, this is just, I study quantum physics. So I'm no longer into the free energy community, And I'm personally not a big fan of the free energy community. Like there's these, I'm not going to mention their names, but there's a big community and they have big conferences where they invite all these big speakers to come in and they talk about free energy and they're so-called experts in the field of free energy. And not one of them has actually built a working device. I'm one of the few people who's actually built a working device. So I one time I actually called them up. I said, I have a working device. Would you be interested in hearing about this working device? And they're not even interested in it. They're not interested in they're just interested in these big names, these so-called free energy gurus, so they can make money off these people going blah, blah, blah. And not one of them has actually built a working device, So that's my opinion of the free energy community. But I do know several people who have working devices, but that's a whole nother subject. So anyway, I just wanted to tie that in with the Apollo, NASA, and how is free energy connected to this moon landing hoax. It is a suppressed technology, and NASA was involved in it. Now we're coming to the artificial sun. This is a lot of people have heard about this. And what is it? It is also a kind of a free energy technology, but it's not ready yet. You know, they're predicting it's going to be another 5 years before it's ready. Hopefully, I can help them speed that up. But the reason I'm showing you this, it's called the tokamak. That's the name. And this was invented in the 1950s in the Soviet Union. So let me just read through this. In the 1950s, you know, they kind of came up with this idea, and they apparently had made a working model in 1958 where they created a stable plasma equilibrium with the magnetic fields. Again, this comes back to the how are you going to protect astronauts from the space radiation? It's the same thing, this torus, magnetic fields, the torus, plasma, you know. So, but then there was a lot of criticism. By the mid-1960s, they started to show improvements on the design, and the Russians released a positive results in 1965. Okay, that's when the America met with the Russians, according to my timeline. But there was some problem with the measurements, and finally a second set of results published in 1968. This time claiming a better performance. They also met with skepticisms. But the Soviets sent a delegate in 1968. The Soviets sent a delegation to the UK and invited them to come make their own measurements. These UK scientists went to the Soviet Union, they measured it, and in 1969, they published a result and in the scientific journal that yes, this machine is producing positive results, and it resulted in a stampede of tokamak construction all over the world. So coming back to this thing about a Cold War between the Soviet Union and the Russians. Okay, so here we have it. In 1969, a publication that this tokamak is working created a stampede of tokamak construction all over the world. It means Europe and America. From 1969, they were all working together to try to create this artificial sun. From 1969, the Apollo 11, you know. Mm-hmm. So what can you say about a Cold War and a space race and a nuclear arms race? This is the solution to the nuclear energy problem. This is a safe version of nuclear energy. As you know, the nuclear reactors today are not safe.
Yeah.
And this is a safe, what we call a safe nuclear reactor. So this is a very exciting project, and I'm also involved in it here in China. So coming to China, this is the Chinese observatory who found the laser reflectors on the moon. Okay, a lot of people say there's no laser. A lot of people in my group, you know, who doubt the Apollo landings, say there's no laser reflectors on the moon. They say you can just bounce a laser off the moon. You don't need the reflector. Yeah, okay. Yes, you can bounce a laser reflector off the moon without the reflector, but if your laser actually does hit a reflector, you will know the difference. And so I can tell you there are laser reflectors on the moon. Here in China, we can prove that. But that does not mean they were put down by human beings. They were put down in an unmanned craft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people ask me why, if China knows that it was a hoax, why don't they blow the whistle? Okay, now, as I mentioned, is that China wants to maintain friendly relations with NASA because they want to continue to receive technology from NASA. So they did issue one statement, okay, but then they retracted it later. But we can find it in the Wayback Machine. We can find out in the 2012, the Chinese article said, "We spotted traces of the previous Apollo missions." Now, they didn't say what those traces were. They just said, "We found traces of the Apollo missions." So this is the Chinese way of being, you know, being careful. You know, we didn't say we found evidence of a man on the moon. We said we found evidences of something there at these Apollo landing sites. Okay. So what are these traces we found? Basically, here's the Indian picture. Okay, the traces we found look just like this. This is the Indian three-legged craft sitting at the Apollo landing site. This is actually proof that the Apollo missions were a hoax. You know, this is the Apollo landing site, same craters, but the wrong craft sitting there. Now, China did not release this image. This image was released by India. We could have released this image, but we didn't want to, because then NASA would be extremely mad that we just debunked their moon landing. But India, I think that India kind of did this accidentally. You know, they were like, oh, we're so proud we got a picture of the Apollo landing site. And they released this image, even though they weren't supposed to. But this image basically just proves the Apollo landings were fake. However, China just recently released this image just a few months ago. And this is showing the blast crater under the Mars lander. Okay. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this. You know, I personally have no reason to doubt that, you know, we sent this unmanned craft to Mars. And now the thing is, the Chinese moon landers do not have a blast crater. Why is that? Because the Chinese moon landings, they cut off their engines really early and they dropped a long way, because it's a really light craft and they can handle that big drop. So there's no blast crater under the Chinese moon landers. But the Mars lander did the same thing as the Apollo missions, where they kept the engine running basically all the way until you're just above the surface. So you can see it was getting closer, getting closer, getting closer. And as it got closer, it got deeper, 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 the hole, and it just blasted a huge hole underneath the craft. So I'm a little bit, I think NASA might not be happy about this, because this is basically blowing the whistle on the moon landings. You know, there should be a blast crater under the Apollo missions, and there's not even touched the soil at all. And this is also interesting. This is the Russian unmanned craft. Okay, when the Russians sent an unmanned craft, they sent a little rover, and the rover was taking pictures of the lander. Okay, what do you see? You see stars. You see stars. The Russian unmanned craft.
Be interesting to look at those stars as if they match up with the actual stars, you know, in that part of the sky.
Look at this one. Here's another picture. The rover was looking back at the lander, and what do you see? You see stars.
Definitely not dust then.
No, those are stars, you know.
I would be interested to see what's that up in the top right hand corner.
This is the top. There's okay, look at the oh, you can't see it there. I have another picture, but anyway, there's this radiation protection. It's just like a flap. It's part of the rover. Okay. And the lander also has it. I have another better picture of the lander, and it also has the same material flapping around on top of it. It's just kind of a radiation protection material.
So there's a line going across here at an angle maybe of 30 degrees or something, and then you've got this flap down. So that's what the stars are on. Is that like the edge of the photo or something? And it's laid on a...
Yeah. So they twisted the photo because they wanted the surface. The camera was at an angle, so they tilted it so that it would be level surface.
Yeah,
you know?
I see.
Okay. Now, here we go. This is a NASA probe. The NASA probe called the Clementine. It was launched in 1994. And what do you see? You see stars. So this is what was the meeting where the Apollo 11 said we couldn't see stars during the
Solar corona.
corona experiment, right? The
Unless we
solar
look through
corona-
the scope or something. The
right.
optics.
So they said, no, I don't remember seeing any stars on the solar corona
Yeah.
experiment. What is a solar corona? It's when the sun is hiding behind the moon.
Hmm.
That's exactly what you have here. The sun is hiding behind the moon. And what do you see? You see stars. So basically, NASA just debunked themselves.
Hmm. Is that, what's that big white sphere at the
That's
top?
the
Is that,
Earth.
that's
That's
the
the
Earth. Okay.
So here you go. And again, here's a NASA Mars lander. Again, a lot of people aren't going to agree with me, but I personally think this is real. I have no reason to doubt an unmanned craft going beyond the Van Allen belts, you know. And what do you see? You see the blast crater underneath. The NASA is also blowing the whistle on themselves by showing us a blast crater underneath their Mars lander.
Hmm. I suppose they'll be talking about throttles and things on Apollo landers, I suppose. You know, the fact that they control it with a throttle, the 10,000 pound thrust and stuff. But
Yeah,
there
they
must be some sort of similar thing on the
they
Apollo,
throttled
sorry,
it.
the Mars landers. Yeah.
They throttled it down, but either way, you're going to get a blast crater because
Yeah.
the LEM was much heavier than these little unmanned landers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much bigger engine, and even if you throttle it down, still there's going to be thrust. And the point is, on the Apollo missions, you know, they were just a few feet before they shut down, a few feet above the surface before they shut down. You know, so there's obviously going to be a blast crater. And I mentioned it last time that China found the moon rocks. They brought moon rocks back to Earth, which are different age from the Apollo mission rocks. This is not it's not a whistle blow. It doesn't really mean anything. The fact that these rocks were younger doesn't mean much. It says, you know, the Chinese rocks are 2 billion years old, whereas the Apollo rocks are 3 billion years old. So that's not really saying much, you know. It just doesn't. It just means that we might have landed in a volcanic area, you know. So that's why these rocks are younger. So this is not really blowing the whistle on anything, but it is interesting, you know. Some people have asked about that, so I'm showing some evidence of that. And so this is just one other last few things here. So when the Apollo is in Earth orbit, when Apollo is in cislunar space, when Apollo is in lunar orbit, you've got this blue glare coming in through the window, right? But when you actually land on the moon, then you've got this white glare coming in the window, right? So why is that? You know, the official story is that there was some kind of a blue tint on the window.
Yeah.
But why is there no blue tint over here, you know?
Yeah.
So this whole blue tint on the window is just an excuse because they were in low Earth orbit. Okay. That's why there's a blue tint, is because you're in low Earth orbit. This is the Earth glare coming in through the window. And why is there white coming in the window here? Because you're on a studio set. Okay. Now coming on to that point, here's the famous
Oh yeah.
could the guy fit through the door, right? Could the guy fit through the door? You know, I'm not 100% sure of this, you know, whether he could fit here. It looks like he could have, but here it looks like he's not going to fit through the door. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. But the one thing I'm going to comment is, okay, here you see the blue light coming through the window, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here the window's dark. Okay. So in almost all of the Apollo images, you see this blue light shining through the Apollo windows. And so why did they do that? Okay, I guess they haven't really answered this, but I guess they'd say we left the lights on inside of the craft, right?
Mm.
Okay, why are the lights on not here? If he's already exiting the ship and he forgot to leave the lights on, if he turned off the lights here, there's no blue glare coming in through the windows here, and then he's already exiting. So somehow, he was already getting ready to exit, and then he's already exited, but somehow between there and there, he turned the lights on. Oh, I forgot to leave. No, it's just ridiculous,
Are they from the same mission? They're not.
Yeah,
from
this is
different missions.
just one picture right after the other.
From Apollo
Yeah,
alone.
Yeah, this is a Buzz Aldrin exiting
Yeah.
the craft, and Neil is taking pictures of Buzz, and he's coming out, and he finally his legs come out, and he climbs down the ladder. These are the famous pictures of Buzz climbing down the ladder.
I was just wondering if the picture on the left is like from a training simulation thing.
No. This is Neil's camera, one shot, and then the next shot in the roll.
Mm.
And here they forgot to turn the light on inside the ship, and here the light is on. It's the funny thing. Okay, so this is also a new kind of a smoking gun, which I just found. At least I think it's a smoking gun. And this is the liftoff of Apollo 15. So this is just going to quickly go here. So what you see is when the ship lifts off, you have these debris which is getting blown away.
Yeah.
And the way they did that is they had what is a cannon. In Hollywood, it's called a shrapnel cannon, which blows these bits of the shrapnel away.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so look at the time stamp here. This is 24 seconds.
Yeah.
The first shrapnel cannon fires and blows these pieces away. And then you look down here, 26 seconds, 2 large chunks of shrapnel are blown away. And these are the ones that fly way off into the distance, like 100 meters, it flies away. The problem here is the time delay. Okay, one is at 24 seconds and one is at 26 seconds. So there's a 2-second delay between these pieces of the ship flying off. That cannot happen. If it's going to be the rocket which causes this chunks of the ship to fly away, they have to have flown away at the same time.
Yeah.
And not only that, I didn't. There's actually 3. What it is there's 3 shrapnel cannons. I didn't show it here, but the first shrapnel cannon fires at 24 seconds, and you see this chunks flying away. And the second shrapnel cannon fires at 25 seconds, and you see some other chunks flying away. And finally, the third shrapnel cannon fires at 26 seconds, and that's when you get these 2 large chunks which fly way off into the distance. So this was in my opinion, a smoking gun. There's no way that these should have flown away all at the same time if it's the same engine exhaust which caused them to fly away.
And also, as the rocket's going up further, it should have less power to disturb material on the moon's surface or on the lower section of the module. Right.
So I've ever since I did my last interview, I spoke about this spotlight behind the shadow. And these debunkers tried to debunk me, So I've been studying this a lot. I put a lot of energy into this liftoff scene. And I can tell you, this is the hardest part of the Apollo missions to debunk, okay? They did an excellent job of doing this. And I'm still not 100% sure how they did it, My theory is that what they did was, here they had the, you can see the footprints and all this, blah, blah, blah. And then when you watch it, they lift all the way up into lunar orbit. You can follow the camera is filming all the way from surface to lunar orbit. So how did they do that? So they must have spliced it. They spliced the film, okay? where you have this fake studio scene, and then they splice over to a larger, like a moon model or something. They have to splice it between a real lunar scene, and then as it lifts up, you can see the footprints, and then they splice over to this moon model where you see it going away. Okay, that's my current theory on how they fake this. This is the hardest thing to disprove, is this lunar takeoff, because they did a really good job of doing that. Okay. Now, finally, I'm going to say one other thing, which probably a lot of people aren't going to agree with. But anyway, this is something I just found. So this is the Apollo 11 lunar liftoff, and the official Apollo version of it. You see this white dot here?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go to here, 9 minutes and 14 seconds, this white dot falls down to the surface of the moon. You can follow it almost all the way down. So what this is a chunk of the ship which fell off, and it falls all the way to the ground. So this is something which cannot be done in a studio. So this is my theory, is that, okay, on Apollo 11, this is an actual unmanned craft that's actually leaving from the surface, and a piece of it falls off and falls down to the surface. Now, if it's like, well, wait a minute, if a part of the craft breaks off, you would think that NASA would mention that somewhere in their archives, in the Surface Journal. Oh, a part of the craft broke off. But they don't want to admit that. They don't want you to see this piece of the ship breaking off. Because if people saw that, they wait a minute, the LEM just lifted off and part of it broke off, people would be freaking out. How can your LEM be falling apart? There's actually several chunks of it that fall off. So in my opinion, this is a real unmanned craft making a real liftoff. Okay, in Apollo 11, you don't see the footprints on the ground before they lift off. Okay, see a camera, and you see the lift off all the way up to lunar orbit, and a part of it breaks off just here before the end of the film. So in my opinion, this is a real liftoff. This is a real lunar liftoff. This is an unmanned craft, and part of it broke off. NASA doesn't want you to notice that. If you watch it, it falls all the way to the lunar surface. So that's something you can't do in a studio. Yeah. So anyway, this is just my theory, is that they sent unmanned crafts, and they use those unmanned crafts to get an idea of what it looks like, what a real lunar landing looks like, what a real lunar takeoff looks like. Okay. Now, finally, my last point here is a quote from Duke. Duke, was he on Apollo 15 or Apollo 16?
I forget which one it was now.
Duke and Pete,
Yeah.
So this is a quote from Duke. He says, Pete, if you took this view that y'all just saw out of the moon and put it in a movie, everybody would say you're faking it. It doesn't look like that. And it's just, you can't see any stars, just pure blackness. And that white gray body sitting on it, it's just really, so, Jera likes to call this a tip of the hat, these, maybe they're almost blowing the whistle on themselves,
They do make references it to being faked throughout the missions, I've noticed. Yeah, little hints and things. Yeah.
So this is just a funny one, where Duke is saying it looks like we're faking about stars, So anyway, that's the end of my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yep.
Right.
Do you have any
stop
questions?
there? Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say, let's think. I've still got to look at some of these Apollo takeoffs and things myself. I mean, it probably formed part of my presentation, but I think it's actually because I saw your thing where you got the antenna and it sort of spun and hit the bounced as it's turning around, and you'd say it's because of the gravity of the Earth or something. Yeah, as it twangs or something.
Yeah.
Well, following it where it's coming up from the moon's surface, I've noticed this, that there's a lot of what's the word? Shadow on the module, the ascent module. A lot of dark density shadow on the ascent module. But when you're looking down at the moon's surface behind it, you can't see, although you can see craters and things moving behind it, you can't see the same density on those shadows. And I would have thought, given the fact that the sun's in a position to create the shadows on the LEM, that you would see similar shadows of same sort of density. Because remember, there's no atmosphere, of course, to diffuse the light or anything like that. They should have the same blackness, either contrast, like Neil Armstrong described it as a contrast. If you adjust the contrast in your TV set, you got black and you got white, and that's basically all there is. And really, my thinking is that the background of the lunar surface, as it's flying over it, should show some of that contrast to match the LEM. And it's almost as if they're two separate images composited one into the other. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But it was an interesting thing.
There was a picture I wanted to show, but I didn't show it today because I think that it's probably a lot of people have seen this. I wanted to show it, but I don't know how many people have seen this. Let me just share the screen again really quick.
Yeah.
This is a really cool image. I wanted to show it in the presentation, but I figured other people have seen it. It's a pretty rare one. I don't know how many people have seen this before, but this is the ship hanging in front of the camera, filming it above the lunar surface.
So that's not an Apollo ship, though, is it? It doesn't look like an Apollo ship.
No, it's not an Apollo ship. I don't know where this came from, but
a science fiction film or something, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's National Film Board of Canada.
Right. Okay.
It's just giving you an idea of how they might have done this.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I came across a YouTube video, and I'll see if I can find it, of this guy making his own sort of cheap special effects movie, space movie, and he actually had these great big flat printed out images of the lunar surface, and he's got a model very much like you just shown there, and he's got the camera behind, and they're just zooming in the model, and it looks totally real. And this is done on a zilch budget, Crazy.
Yeah.
So earlier on, I was talking about how they're going to move this Artemis 2 date forward from 2004 to 2003. And the reason they're doing that is because they're feeling confident they might be able to pull it off this time. So why are they feeling so confident? It has to do with this new technology called boron nitride nanotubes. Now, I highly recommend you should watch this video. It's very interesting. She's talking about, well, there's no way to really stop this galactic cosmic radiation from coming into the ship, but we can try to bust it apart on its way through the ship. Now, she's talking about how there's different ways of busting it apart, including using atoms which are lower on the atomic scale, such as hydrogen, helium, boron, and nitrogen. And so that's how they came up with this new boron nitride nanotube. They're not going to come out and publicly admit that this is the radiation shielding that they're using, because in doing so, that would basically blow the whistle on the Apollo missions. But anyway, I think that they've been making a lot of progress with this, and they've seen some positive results in its ability to bust apart this galactic cosmic radiation particles. So this may be the reason why they're feeling confident in moving that date forward.
So that was the 10th Apollo Detectives little mission we've done here. The mission to expose the truth of the missions which we believe never happened. Until evidence is presented to us that says that they did happen, I'm going to maintain that position. I don't see why we should do anything else. I'd like to thank Rasa Viharii for presenting this very, very interesting series of informations that he's given us on many, many different subjects and aspects of the Apollo missions. That's much appreciated. We do hope to see Rasa again on future productions, along with Marcus Jara and Scott and other people who can't be with us this evening, but you will find their contribution in past episodes of this series. Thank you very much, all of you, for watching. I'm Ben Emlyn Jones. This is the Apollo Detectives.